You're very welcome to Pól Speaks. I'm Pól and I'm about to speak. So last Thursday I put up a poll on my Pól Speaks Twitter page and I asked what would you like my first podcast to be on? And I thought, being a rapper, everyone would want to hear my top 10 favourite rap albums. But no, the results came back and by a percent the topic that I'm going to discuss today came back, which is my top 10 favourite Irish footballers of all time. Now, I probably like football as much as I like rap music, so I'm happy out to be talking about football. I've been supporting Ireland, I'd say now, for about maybe, 18, 19 years. There's been a lot of ups, there's been a lot of downs, but I will argue to this day that Ireland is the best national team that you could support in football. And I know the football's ugly, but you have to think of it this way, right? It's not as soul-sapping as, supporting Scotland, who never do anything. And it's not as boring as supporting, England, who get to every major championship and, find a new glorious way to be eliminated from those championships. But there's no fun in them qualifying because it's too easy for them. But for Ireland, the World Cup qualifying, the Euro qualifying, it's made for us. It's always a struggle to get in a playoff. And then once we get in the playoffs, we rarely even get beyond there. It's just entertaining, really, is what I'd say. Even if the football can be quite boring at the best of times. But, I myself, I'm a Wigan fan. I'm a lazy Cork City fan. I'll support Celtic in Europe, but I'd say the team I've kind of invested in most is the Irish national football team, and I feel like a lot of Irish people are like that because, if you're not totally into the Airtricity League, you're probably into the Premier League when you probably support one of the top 4-6 teams in that, but you don't really have a horse in the race, if you know what I mean. They're just teams you supported from a young age. But with Ireland, it's it feels like, that's your team. That's really your natural team where you're from. So I think a lot of people like Ireland is probably the team that we're all invested in most when it comes to football. So, we all, even if you look at international games, you might look at a Serbia match or you might look at an Albania match. And there's only 10 people and a man with a dog in the crowd when you watch their matches. But if you look at an Ireland match, even a friendly, 30,000 people will show up to the Aviva to watch Ireland versus Oman. That's how much people follow Irish football. But I'll get in more throughout the podcast into how I connect with the Irish football team and just my history with supporting the Irish football team. But I should probably get the list underway. Number 10, my 10th. And by the way, when I do this list, I'm not saying that the 10 players I pick are the best Irish footballers ever, or they're the players I've seen and the players that I've seen play well in an Irish jersey. I'm not really taking in what they did in the Premier League. So my 10th favourite player to ever play for Ireland, and he still plays today, is David McGoldrick. He is the greatest striker I've ever seen that can't run and can't score. He's amazing. This last campaign, I'm telling you now, right? If it wasn't for David McGoldrick, people would have been trying to get Mick McCarthy out halfway through it, because those last 8 games trying to qualify for the 24 team Euros, that was a really poor campaign. Even in comparison to some of Martin O'Neill's campaigns, that was shocking what we just saw over the last year. And the only real beam of light was kind of David McGoldrick throughout it. Now, in future going forward, I would play him in a kind of Totti role, where I'd play him behind, somebody who can actually score goals. But, I don't know where we're going to get a player that can score goals either, because, as much as I like Obafemi and Connolly, and I want to believe in the youth, I've seen them and they don't really seem like they're goal scorers either, And I know they're young, But it feels like, for like 15 years we were saying, oh, Shane Long, he's so quick. He does everything great apart from scoring, but he'll score eventually, and it never transpired, and it could be the same with Connolly and Obafemi. So, for me, I would start Ida in front of McGoldrick from now on, because I think Ida could be that player that could score goals if given enough chances. I honestly think he's the most talented young player we have, and I'm not just saying that because I'm from Cork. I haven't really seen enough of Parrott to really, give any thought on him, but I'm sure he could be great someday as well. But yeah, going forward, I would put Dave McGoldrick behind Adam Ida. And the last year, he's just been class. And I remember I saw him back in like 2016 before the Euros. He didn't make the squad, but I thought he was the best player that played in a warm-up match against, I believe, was it Montenegro at Craven Cottage. He was the best player that we had on that day, and I was surprised he didn't make the squad. But yeah, big David McGoldrick stan over here. When did he got his first game at, I believe, 26 for Ireland. So that's actually quite young for Ireland. Like, one thing you'll notice with a lot of players, in other countries, like if you look at Ampadu for Wales, when he destroyed us when they beat us 4-0 in the Nations League a few years back, they'll pick players at any age once they're good enough. But in Ireland, there's a process. You can't just be a good player at 21 or 22 and get in the Irish team, Like, that's why we've lost Grealish and Rice. You have to, it's almost like you have to have had a few kids, got married and, paid off a few mortgages before people think you're responsible enough to get a cap for Ireland, So Dave McGoldrick got his first cap at 26. He's got 1 goal in 12 games. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like he's been revolutionary in the Irish team, but I like him. I thought he showed a lot of heart in that last campaign, and yeah, I mean, he's got another few years. He's 32, so he has another maybe campaign or two left in him. Knowing Irish players, he could be playing till 37, so he could have another 5 years. So yeah, stick him in the Totty role, never up front alone, because he can't score. My 9th favourite player to ever play for Ireland is Mr. Steve Finnan. The classiest player I've ever seen play right back for Ireland. Shout out to Seamus Coleman. He has a lot of heart. He's had a good Premier League career, but Steve Finnan, I don't think I ever saw him have a bad game for Ireland. He played, even when Ireland were rubbish on the night, he played unbelievable at the 2002 World Cup. He's he's played 53 times for Ireland, scored 2 goals. I actually saw one of those goals, funny enough, because back in 2008, the qualifying under Steve Staunton, my dad was working at Pfizer's at the time, and they had these kind of raffles every week. It was just during this, just for this campaign. I don't know, was it that FAI couldn't get rid of tickets for the games back then or what? But for some reason at Pfizer's they were doing raffles for the tickets for the matches every week, or every so often when they be on. And I don't know if my dad rigged it or whatever, but we seem to win tickets for all the matches under Steve Staunton. So I saw Steve Finnan score against Cyprus in a 1-1 draw. I think it was actually Don Givens that was in charge that night. And yeah, he scored this goal in the 90th minute, and I thought he showed a lot of heart, to still be going even that late into the game. This is Steve Finnan, a Champions League winner, playing for shitty Ireland against Cyprus, a team that beat us 5-2, and yeah, he scored a great goal that night. I think that was his last game because Trapattoni never liked him. Interesting trivia about him is he's the only player to play in every league, the Champions League. Sorry, I should say every league in England, the Champions League, the World Cup. That's quite an achievement. He was like Jamie Vardy before Jamie Vardy. Also, I read that He killed someone. It says here, Finnan was arrested in June 2005 after running over an 81-year-old man in Liverpool. So, a lot of people always wonder, whatever happened to Steve Finnan? Where is he now? Why do I see, mediocre players like Gary Breen and Kevin Kilbane all over the TV, but never Steve Finnan? He caught a body, so he's probably laying low. He's like the Irish football Gucci Mane. Anyway, moving on from there. My number 8 favourite player to ever play for Ireland is Mr. John Walters. Last 10 years hasn't been a pretty watch. Ireland, back under Brian Kerr, Mick McCarthy, we had some good quality players that were playing at top 10 teams in the Premier League. That hasn't been the case over the last 10 years. But one player that we have had that's played consistently in the Premier League is John Walters. He's got 14 goals in 54 games for Ireland, which is actually quite good. I think I like players that show passion. I know he gets in a lot of fights. I like that. I like players that, are involved in controversy. I like footballers that show personality. I think that was one of the problems with Glenn Whelan. Apart from him being a, painfully mediocre footballer, he didn't really have much of a personality to draw people to him. But John Walters, people love John Walters because he scored. Not only was he a character, but he scored really important goals as well. The two he scored against Bosnia, that helped us get to the Euros. He scored a crucial equaliser against Austria. He scored a few against Estonia, I believe, back in the day for the playoffs for the Euro 2012. So he scored a lot of important goals, and yeah, you knew that he suited Ireland's game perfectly. Because let's be real, we didn't really have many skillful players bar Wes Hoolahan. So we had to rely on our physical side of the game. He could get physical, but he could also score goals, which is something that a lot of forwards that we have can't really do. So yeah, I like John Walters. He could be, when you watch him play, sometimes he could play a Sunday League player. And then other days he could play a very competent, striker, a Premier League striker. I think he's underrated, to be honest, And I love Roy Keane too, but, I think some of the things Roy Keane said about John Walters were kind of nasty. I think John Walters did a great job for Ireland over the last 10 years. Next player I'm going to pick is Damien Duff. To be honest, and by the way, we're on number 7 now, for those of you keeping count. To be honest, Damien Duff, I don't know, did he ever really do it in an Irish jersey after, World Cup 2002? I remember he scored an equaliser against Russia in the 2004 qualifiers, but aside from that, he never did it in a green shirt. I felt like I was always looking forward to seeing Damien Duff in an Irish jersey, but it was because of what I'd seen him do with Chelsea more than what I'd seen him do with the boys in green. He played 100 games and scored 8 goals. For somebody with his quality and somebody that had his club career, you'd be expecting him to score a lot more goals and to have a lot more memorable moments for the Irish team. So yeah, I feel 100 caps. I kind of look at it like Kevin Kilbane. It was 100 caps, but it wasn't we achieved anything during that period of time. So yeah, Damien Duff. I to be honest, as an analyst, I'm not really into him. I find him kind of beige. As a footballer, I loved him for Chelsea. I thought he was class. The one goal that always sticks out is that one he got against Barcelona back in the day. But yeah, I should probably say something positive about him because he is my 7th favourite Irish footballer of all time. But yeah, I hope the story about him mocking Stephen Ireland's precious new, was it dreads or something Stephen Ireland got, and he mocked him in the elevator. I hope that's not true, because I'm against bullying, and I'd like to think that my young football hero Damien Duff was also against that kind of behaviour. So yeah, I mean, again, like, class player. I'm not. The reason he's seventh on the list is because I would be excited to see Damien Duff play for Ireland. Like, I knew he had the class, and you were kind of just waiting for him to do something special in an Irish jersey, and it just never happened. So maybe, if he actually did some more important things, aside from like crossing in the ball for Keane against France, if he did more important things after 2002, he might be higher up in the list. So yeah, I like Damien Duff, but he's only number 7. Moving on to number 6, I gotta put the player in that scored the goal that actually got me into football, and that is Matt Holland. Matt Holland, like, he wasn't world-class player by any stretch of the imagination. He could do all the basic things right. He was a good kind of championship, maybe lower top 10 Premier League standard player. But that strike he scored against Cameroon in 2002, like, that was just, that to me, that's what really got me into the Irish football team. I remember watching that with my dad back in our house, and like getting up at 7 a.m. and just that goal going in, like, that's the first time I was like, whoa, this is like the power that football can have on people, seeing how happy it made my dad and stuff. So yeah, I gotta put Matt Holland in this list for that alone. I always liked him. I don't really think he had much of a career for Ireland after the 2002 World Cup. He played 49 times and scored 5 goals. I actually, over COVID, this will tell you how bored I was over COVID, I watched the qualifying for the 2002 World Cup on YouTube, and I seen that Matt Holland actually scored the exact same goal against Portugal in the qualifying. So, even today, because Ireland don't really create many chances, I think Matt Holland would like fit really well into the Irish team, because if we can't create chances, then we need someone like Matt Holland that can score from like 50 yards out. So yeah, that's why I put Matt Holland number 6. Simply just because he scored that amazing goal against Cameroon. Number 5 is Roy Keane. Of course he was going to end up on this list. I'm a Cork man after all. But yeah, I mean, Roy Keane, 2002 World Cup, as I said, is one of my fondest memories of the Irish football team. And yeah, the fact that he didn't play in that and left us all down, I mean, that was disappointing. But I guess, you got to understand, the tosser he was dealing with, fucking John Delaney, who, we've all found out we always knew was quite corrupt. So you can't really be too mad at him in hindsight for not playing in the 2002 World Cup. But nah, he was some player. Probably, I would argue, apart from Duff, I'd put Duff and maybe Given in the world-class category as well. Roy Keane was probably the only world-class footballer that I've seen play for Ireland in my lifetime. He got 9 goals in 67 games, which is decent. We all know, like, we've all seen the highlights against Holland and stuff. Like, he was a legend in the for the boys in green, and I mean, I said I wouldn't take club farm or their history in the Premier League into account when doing this list, but if I was, I'd have to put Roy Keane as the best Irish player I've ever seen. But in an Irish jersey, I didn't really see him do much, because after the 2002 World Cup, he was gone for 2 years, and then he came back under Brian Kerr, and I don't know, that campaign to me was very disappointing. And I know a lot of people, especially Dublin people, love Brian Kerr, but I would argue that campaign for the 2006 World Cup was the most disappointing football campaign that I've seen Ireland in. It just was, because we'd great players back then. We'd players that were playing in top 10 teams in the Premier League. Like, we really should have beaten that, Swiss team who had a Hacken Yakin, the scoring in my childhood, scoring scoring goals to knock us out every 2 years. I mean, really, that Swiss team are not half as good as they are now. And we should have, with like Roy Keane, Robbie Keane, Damien Duff, Shay Given, we should have been able to get through that group. I know there was France, but aside from them, we should have at least made a playoff. So yeah, I know people love Brian Kerr, but that campaign was disappointing. Roy Keane, he's just like, he's very Cork at the end of the day. That's what I would say about him. You know, he's blunt, he's honest, he tells it how it is. Some people like it, some people don't. I think you can't hold the 2002 World Cup against him. I think he was a fabulous player for Ireland, and he was fabulous with United. So yeah, he definitely has to be on this list, but you know, for reasons I've stated, he's not any higher than 5. Number 4 is Clinton Marson. The streets will never forget Clinton Marson. The fields will never forget Clinton Marson. Man, this guy, like, I think his record for Ireland is like actually quite impressive. Like, I know people kind of think of him as a joke in some ways, but like, if you look at how many goals, his record is 9 goals in 36 games, which that's a really good record for an Irish footballer, you know. He got 3 goals in that aforementioned 2006 World Cup campaign. You know, he was very handy up front. He scored against Switzerland, he scored against Israel. Oh my God, that game against Israel, away, both games, away and at home. Oh, I still get PTSD flashbacks from that. The goalkeeper, I can't remember his name, it was Dudu a what? Just found it there. Dudu a what? Like, he got Andy O'Brien sent off. He was making saves that fucking David De Gea or any top keeper you can think of today couldn't make. And, you know, we lost a 2-0 lead because fucking John O'Shea gave away a silly penalty. And it just felt like, looking back at that Irish team, even thinking about like the game away to Slovakia, you know, the game at home to Austria, you know, the horrible match away to Cyprus. Like, there were some very poor performances from Ireland back then, and like we had a good team back then. If you look at the players on paper, a better team than what we have now, and just some of those results. But yeah, going back to Clinton Marson, I always liked him, you know. I was kind of disappointed when Trapp wouldn't call him up again, because I think he got injured. You know, he was always in the Irish setup up till about 2005, and then he got injured. But then he made a kind of comeback with Crystal Palace. But Trapattoni wouldn't pick him. Like, I'm a big Clinton Marson stan again, and it was disappointing to see him not pick him. You know, when you're 7 or you're 8 years old, like the striker for your national team is going to be your hero, and you're always going to remember that growing up. And like, the main striker for Ireland during 2004-2005 was Clinton Marson. Next up, at number 3, I'm going with Richard Dunne. And again, Richard Dunne, I just remember him always being good for Ireland, but apart from that game against Russia, where he like smacked his face and did like a clearance off the line that still doesn't make sense today. Like, I don't know how he got that off the line, and don't know how Russia didn't score in that match. But apart from like that match, I don't really remember him being, you know, like amazing in any match for Ireland, but I remember him always being good and solid, you know. And he played a lot of times like for Ireland. He seemed to be there for my whole childhood, playing for Ireland, even into my teen years. Like, he played 80 matches for the Republic of Ireland, and yeah, he was consistently just good, you know. I don't really have much else to say about him. I mean, was he the most skillful or talented? No, he was just solid at the back, you know. It's funny how Man City didn't keep him, because, you know, in some ways, when you look at the defenders that they had apart from Company, Man City never really had another great centre-back. It didn't really work for Boateng. It didn't really work for Savic or Boyata, so they could have done with keeping Richard Dunne, because, yeah, I always thought he was a really good centre-back, and probably the best centre-back that I've seen Ireland have. You know, maybe aside from John Egan, but it's kind of early days for John Egan yet. But yeah, I like Richard Dunne a lot. Number 2, I'm going with Robbie Keane. Like it has to be Robbie Keane. You know, like if you grew up around the same era that I grew up and was watching Irish football, like Robbie Keane was the man. You know, like some people say he only scored in like the easy matches or whatever, but like he also scored all the important goals in the '02 World Cup, apart from the Matt Holland one. He was always there in the last minute of big games, like the game against Italy where we got a 1-1 draw. I'd still say that that's an old Hunt's goal, but we'll give it to Robbie. Like he was a great player for Ireland. I know sometimes he can come across as a bit of a tool, but like, can't we all, you know, with his it's my dream to play for Mexico City. You know, I grew up dreaming about playing for Luton Town FC. You know, but like as a player, like as a forward that could score goals, like he really did it for Ireland. He's got 68 goals in 146 games. And a lot of people were getting a bit tired of him maybe for the last 5 years of his career with Ireland. But when you look now, like I'd take a Robbie Keane in that team. Like we've no goal scorers now. And Robbie Keane, like, say what you want about him. Say what you want about his all-round play. Like he's kind of the opposite to all our other forwards that we've had, in that he could score but didn't really offer much else. But you know, at the end of the day, football's a simple game. Goals are really important, and Robbie Keane gave me a lot of memories growing up, scoring great goals for Ireland. So yeah, he has to be like high up on anyone's list that's doing a top 10 favourite Irish footballer, or in anybody's all-time 11, because he was incredible, you know. My top player to ever play for Ireland is, drum roll please, Shay Given. Yeah, it just has to be Shay Given. We've the same birthday, 20th of April. You know, he played 134 times for Ireland. You know, like I don't remember him ever, you know, making any big error really. I mean, a lot of people say back in Euro 2012 he could have done better with some of the goals, but aside from that, like I thought he made some incredible saves. Like thinking about the one against Zidane back in the day when France came to Ireland back in that dreaded 2006 World Cup campaign. Like that save he made against Zidane, like that was class. Like that was real world class. Like I said earlier, aside from Keane and Duff, he'd be the only player I'd put in the world class category. And that's no knock on Robbie Keane. I just feel like if you look at Robbie Keane's club career, I think if he was on that next level of being world class, it would have worked out for him at a Liverpool or a United. But nah, Shay Given for years was so consistent. He was by far our most consistent player. Like every campaign he'd make really important saves. You know, and there's a reason why the 2008 qualifying campaign went so bad. And it's not only because of Steve Staunton, it's because Shay Given was injured for most of it. So we had like Paddy Kenny in goal, and we had Wayne Henderson in goal against San Marino. So like if we had Shay Given, like who knows, like things might have gone a lot better for us in that campaign. I don't think we'd have done better than Czech Republic, but we definitely would have done better than what we did. So yeah, Shay Given, like, had a legendary career with Newcastle as well. Didn't really work out for him in Man City, but he was past his best by the time he went to Man City. Like I think it was 34, 35. Shay Given in his prime though was some keeper. Like even in the World Cup 2002, that save he made with his feet against Spain. Actually, now that we talk about that, and I have to say this, I know he's my number one favourite player of all time for Ireland, but he should have saved that Mendieta penalty. He really, like, everybody says Mendieta one of the greatest penalty takers of all time. I would have saved that penalty if I just stood there. Like, that was a shite penalty, and Shay Given should have saved that. But that aside, no, Shay Given, one of the probably greatest goalkeepers of all time, period, I would say. Like, not just for Ireland. I know people might say that's me jumping the gun, but if you look at his career and for how long he was consistently good, he has to be up there. So that was my top 10 Irish football team. If I tried to make some kind of a all-time 11 with it, I guess I'd obviously put Given in goal. Then I didn't really pick too many defenders, but I'd put Finnan at right back. I'd put Dunne centre back. I'm going to put Egan beside Dunne. And then left back, I'd probably have to go with, I don't know, I'm don't really like Stephen Ward. I'll just put Enda Stevens as the left back. And then in central mid, I'd have Holland. And we're playing the classic boring 4-4-2. I'd have Keane alongside Holland. I'd have Walters out on the right, Duff out on the left, and then up front I have Robbie Keane and Clinton Morrison. And unfortunately David McGoldrick would be on the bench. So yeah, that would be my top 10. That would be my all-time 11. As far as players who didn't make the list, honourable mentions would have to go to Lee Carsley. You know, I always liked him. I'm not sure if he ever did great for Ireland, but I don't know, I just liked him because he had a bald head. Who else? I liked Gary Kelly from the 02 World Cup. He didn't really do much after that. I kind of liked Ian Hart as well, just somebody that could score from a free kick. Aside from that, I like Caleb Folan. I liked a lot of Irish players. You know, I like the current Irish team. I like a lot of them. I like Doherty. You know, I kind of like Hendrick as well. I know a lot of people don't really like him, but I rate him. You know, that game against Sweden a few years ago, he did really well in that. You know, I'm more than anything, I'm excited about the future. You know, with players like Malumbu, you know, who else we have? Ida, Connolly, Parrott, Nathan Collins, Smallbone, Mark Travers. You know, like we've got a lot of players that in the future, you know, could be big stars, and I think the future for Irish football is looking good. You know, because the last 10-15 years have been a hard watch, but it has been entertaining. And that's probably where I'll wrap it up for today's podcast. Hope you enjoyed. I kept it short enough. Next time I'll probably do my top 10 favourite hip-hop albums of all time. So check that out, and like and share and tell people about the podcast if you enjoy it. I've been Pól Speaks, and I've said my piece.